The President, please be seated. The court is now in session. During today's sessions, the Chamber continues hearing the testimony of Dr. Hun Chun Lee. Greffier of the trial chamber is now instructed to report on the current status of the parties to the proceedings. Mr. Dujpari. Good morning, Mr. President and Your Honors. All the parties to the proceedings are present except Mr. Ieng Sari, who is present but in his holding cell due to his health concerns. Mr. Ang Udam, the National Co-Counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari, will be arriving at the court rather late today. The witness, Mr. Hun Chun Lee, who gives testimony today, is present and there is no reserve witness. The President, thank you. Next, we would like to hand over to the prosecution to continue putting questions to this witness. Before this, the Chamber would like to remind parties to the proceedings, in particular the co-prosecutors and civil party counsels, that you will have this first section of the trial to finish the questioning. Indeed, you have until the first break of this morning. And that your questions must always be in the scope of the relevant facts in case file 002/01 concerning the policy of the evacuations and the administrative structure at the local level.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honours. Good morning, Dr. Chun Lee. As you heard from the President, we have a limited time, so I'll ask you, please, to keep your answers as brief as possible, as we have a few areas to finish this morning. We were discussing yesterday the disappearances of some of the cadre in the Northwest Zone and the changing authority structure resulting. I wish to discuss another related point, which you also describe in your book. This is at Khmer ERN 00678865, English ERN 00369-758, and just for today's transcript, the document number is D313/1.2.8. This passage follows the discussion we had yesterday about the enemies inside the party, and it reads as follows, quote, "Another great surprise was an official announcement by the Khmer Rouge cadre of the removal of Hu Nim, Minister of Information. A labourer who was known as Hu Nim's relative was taken away. The Khmer Rouge cadre were also continuously removed and replaced, the newcomers calling traitors their predecessors." Now, I wish to focus only on the announcement in relation to Hu Nim, the Minister of Information. Could you tell the court where you heard this announcement?
Response. I heard this announcement that Hunam, the former minister, was removed. It was at night after the labor work of the whole day. We were convened to a meeting in which announcements was made concerning the removal of Minister Hunam. I heard this and everyone in the meeting also bore witness to this announcement. Because the Khmer Rouge would allow laborers to work during the daytime, and in the evening we would be convened to meetings.
Thank you very much for clarifying that point. Now, if I can move on to another area you discussed with my colleague yesterday, and it is the speech that you heard on the radio, I believe, a speech by Khieu Samphan, a reading out of the new constitution. Can I ask you first, you said to us that you knew Mr. Khieu Samphan when he was in charge of a newspaper in Phnom Penh, L'Observateur. Can you tell us how it was that you came to know Mr. Khieu Samphan in that period?
Response. I knew Mr. Khieu Samphan in his capacity as an intellectual and the head of the L'Observateur newspaper. I did not really have good contact or close relation with him in any way. And Mr. Khieu Samphan read the Constitution. In his reading, he linked to then Prince Norodom Sihanouk. At that time, the head of the military hospital, there was another meeting convened by the head of the hospital where medical staff would be asked to surround the radio when it was tuned into a channel, and that we heard announcement in Khmer which read that King Norodom Sihanouk resigned as the head of state, and then we heard that Mr. Khieu Samphan was then installed as the president of the state presidium. Then he proceeded to read the 25 article constitution that I remember only two of them. One of which is that people were allowed to follow any religion of their choice, and that he also was reading another article which is about the rights of both of all Cambodian citizens who can have the right to access to all job opportunity.
Thank you. We have available to us a transcript which is dated the 5th of January 1976, and it contains text of a speech that is attributed to Mr. Khieu Samphan. Mr. President, with your permission, I'd like to read a very brief excerpt from this document and see whether the witness recognizes it as the speech that he heard. This is document E3/273. It is, as I said, a 5th of January 1976 transcript of a speech attributed to Mr. Khieu Samphan. I propose to read a very brief passage and see whether the witness recognizes that.
The President, you may proceed. Court officer is now instructed to obtain a hard copy from the co-prosecutor for the witness if it is available.
I do apologize. We didn't prepare one simply because it's not a document that the witness has seen before, but we can display it on the screen and I can read if that's acceptable.
The President, as you indicated that the witness had not seen the document before, how could it be that he should be asked to examine it, because it has already been the rule that if a document that is not known to the witness previously, then it should not be shown to him or her?
Mr. President, in accordance with that instruction, I was not proposing to show him the document, but as Your Honours would recall, in instances such as this, where there is a nexus between the document and the evidence already given, there is a foundation to simply verify whether the contents of the document are the same contents which the witness has heard before. So I'm not proposing to show him the document. I wish to only read a brief excerpt and see whether those words are the same words that he heard and has been describing for us.
The President, you may proceed.
I'm grateful, Mr. President. Dr. Hun Chun Lee, I will read brief passages and see whether you recognize them. They commence at Khmer ERN 00657 436, French ERN 00725 795, and English 00167 810. It's entitled Text of Deputy Prime Minister Khieu Samphan's Report on the New Draft Constitution, delivered on 14 December 1975, Third National Congress in Phnom Penh recorded. And these are the passages that I wish to discuss with you. Quote, in preparing this constitution, we fought step by step to overthrow the traitorous administration, which was the fruit of the aggressive culture of the US imperialists and their lackeys, the traitorous Lon Nol Sirik Matak Son Nyop Tan clique. We overthrew this traitorous administrative power from one village to another, from one commune to another, from one district to another, until we ousted it throughout the country. And then the two articles that I wish to read. The first passage is as follows, quote, all our citizens enjoy the right to employment, thus unemployment absolutely does not exist in our democratic Cambodia. And then the next passage a little bit further down, quote, Chapter 15, Article 20 stipulates that our people have the right to practice whatever religion they like and the right not to practice any religion at all. This is a new freedom for our people. Also, as stated in our Constitution, our stand is not to allow any foreign imperialists to use religion to subvert us. And I'll stop there. Dr. Hun Chun Lee, just based on the words that you've heard, and if you recall, is that the speech that you heard on the occasion that you've been describing for us?
Response. First, allow me to say that I have never heard of this document before, and that the speech in which then Prince Norodom Sihanouk resigned was not long. It was brief, clearly written in Khmer and French. And the speech that referred to the Constitution was also rather short, but I have never seen this document before.
I do understand that. If I can just clarify very briefly, the words that you heard, the words that I read out, do they in any way refresh your memory? Are they the words that you heard when Khieu Samphan gave the speech that you heard on the radio? Are they the same words, to put it differently?
Response. These wordings were not the words read out by Khieu Samphan or then Prince Norodom Sihanouk during that meeting.
Thank you very much. We will move on to another area. Our time is limited, so we can't deal with all of the aspects of the changing authority structure in the Northwest Zone, and in particular in relation to people that you knew. But I would like to ask you about two individuals, given that you knew many doctors that were at one stage working in Khmer Rouge administered hospitals, and specifically the two doctors that you discuss at several sections of your book are Dr. Phung Kim Ser, who I believe you describe as the Director of Provincial Health, and Dr. Kim San. Could I ask you, please, to say for us, very briefly, because time is limited, what you learned about what happened to these two individuals, Phung Kim Ser and Kim San?
Response. Dr. Kim San was appointed as a doctor at District Hospital at Prek Luang. Dr. Phung Kim Ser was appointed as a doctor at another district named Sao Manua at the Sao Manua Pagoda.
Hi.
And Dr. Kim San has disappeared. Of course, both of them had disappeared one after another, and it was after the Khmer New Year of the 1977. In 1980, when I went to Battambang, I saw Mr. Dr. Kim San's photo at Tua Slang. But for Mr. Phung Kim Ser, I only saw his name in the list of a book for the book detailing the names of the enemy. So I believe that these two individuals had been brought all the way to Tua Slang.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. President, with your permission, I'd like to show the witness another prisoner list from S21 to see whether or not he can identify two individuals in that document who may be the individuals we've been discussing just now. This document is D312.1.49. I have a hard copy if you wish to that to be presented to the witness.
The President, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll hand a hard copy to the court officer, and we can display a digital copy on the screen, Your Honours, if that's acceptable for Khmer speakers to be able to see. The relevant ERNs here, if the court officer could assist, please, in Khmer 00006623, and in English it is 00837-537. In this document, Dr. Chun Lee, I'm interested in only two names. It is a long list of doctors and professors at S21 with execution dates indicated. Number 8, if you see there, is an individual whose name is indicated as Kim San, Northwest Zone Doctor, entry 27 December 1977, execution 30 December 77. As you read that name, is that the same person, as far as you can tell, as the individual that you've been describing for us?
The President, Mr. Witness, please pause before you see the red light, before you proceed. Response. Yes, that is the individual I mentioned. He was the doctor, the head of Badambong Hospital. And the second person, Man Moningam, is not known to me, but Pung Kum Sia, person here appears on this page is the person who worked as a doctor that I mentioned. I also even saw the photo of Mr. Kum Kum San, though I did not see photo of Mr. Pung Kum Sia at Tuas Lang. I only saw his name.
Thank you very much. I just wish to indicate for the record that Dr. Pung Kum Sia is listed under number 10, and that we do have on the case file a prisoner file for this individual, which indicates that he died under torture. The document numbers are IS 5.80 and D82 / Roman numeral 2 - Annex 33. Thank you, Doctor. And in the limited time remaining, can I ask you about the fate of other doctors who were at some stage working in the Northwest Zone? You indicate in your book, and I will provide the ERN shortly, you indicate first that, I believe in relation to Battambang, there were only 2 surviving doctors, that is yourself and Dr. Un Si, out of 14 civilian and 4 military physicians. The ERN for that is Khmer 00678908 and English 003699794. Given that you worked in Battambang immediately following the period, is that correct? Are those your observations from the time that only 2 out of a total of 18 doctors survived?
Response. Yes, it is correct. And I also wish to add that Mr. Un Si was a civilian or a physician for civilians, not a military doctor. Today he lives in Canada.
Thank you. And one final point on the fate of the doctors and medical staff. A couple of pages on, at Khmer ERN 00678-912 and English ERN 00369-797. Here you are discussing the Battambang Hospital, where you returned immediately following the Khmer Rouge period, and you say the following, quote, "Among a hospital staff of 125 members, only over 30 had survived the Khmer Rouge regime. More than half of them were widows." Could you just tell the court in brief terms how you were able to assess that information as soon as you returned to the Battambang Hospital?
Response. It is not difficult to assess this because these widows whose husband had been killed, of course, because these women are now widows.
Thank you. Did you know some or most of those people who had disappeared, given that you also, you told us at an earlier time, had worked at the civilian hospital in Battambang?
Response. I worked at Battambang Hospital from 1967 until 1973, so I worked there long enough to know all medical staff, and by 1973 I then worked at the military hospital.
Thank you, Doctor. Given that our time is limited, I'm going to draw my examination to a close. I appreciate that you lost many family members according to your book. My colleagues, the civil party lawyers, may ask you about that. I wish to thank you for coming here to assist the court. I know my questions may have been difficult at times. We've covered a lot of ground. We're very grateful to you. Thank you, Your Honours, for giving us extra time with this witness. We will end our examination here.
The President, thank you. We would like now to hand over to the co-lawyers for the civil parties to put some questions to the witness. Counsel Pekang. Mr. President and Your Honours, Counsels Van Poe and Elizabeth Simonow will be putting some questions to this witness. With your leave. The President, you may proceed. Counsel Van Poe. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honours, the prosecutors and parties to the proceedings. Good morning, Dr. Chun Lee. I am Van Poe, representing civil parties. Due to time limitation, I would like to ask you only very few questions, but at the same time I would like you to also be brief in your responses. My questions are relevant to the content of your book, the book that has already been provided to you by the prosecutor. I would like to begin by asking you a few questions concerning the events prior to 1975 at Battambang. You stated already that before 1975, you worked as a military medic at Hospital 403 Military Hospital, and that all the majority of the patients, inpatients at that time were soldiers. Can you please tell the chamber what kind of sicknesses or disease that these individuals who were treated at your hospital had? Response. By mid-1973, I was transferred from civilian hospital to a military hospital of 403 in Battambang. The inpatients at this military hospital were mainly soldiers, and the majority of whom were injured or wounded people. Question. Do you know where these wounded soldiers of Lonol brought from? Response. I can't exactly say where they all were from, but at the provincial military hospital there was an ambulance that would be used to transport all the wounded and sick people to this provincial hospital. Question. Can you estimate how many Lonol soldiers were treated at the hospital in total? Response. So far as I remember, patients were classified into light and severe, those also who would be undergo some operation, but altogether this number would not exceed 100 in any given time. Question. Do you remember having heard any fightings before the 1975 or April 1975? The President. Mr. Witness, please hold on. Wait until you see the red light before you proceed to respond. Response. Fighting in some hot battlefields in Mong Risai, Bantiai, Prey Swai, there were fierce fightings there, and also fighting happened at Tapon location and other battlefields surrounding Battambang province. Question. My following questions would be relevant to the event of the 17th of April 1975 in particular. Mr. President, with your leave, I may wish to read some excerpt from his book under Khmer ERN 0067, 8756, English ERN 003696 In that text, he said that by 1 a.m., the city dwellers are woken up by the noise of some motorcycles in the city, and there was also noise from the crowd. It lasted for several hours. My question to you is, apart from hearing people cheering up and the sounds of the motorbikes, did you hear any gunshot? Response. Before I talk about the evening of that day, I would like to talk about what happened during the daytime first on the 17th of April 1975. Early in the morning, no Khmer Rouge soldier came to Battambang as yet. Indeed, after the announcement of General Mai Sichon of the Lonol to ask all Lonol soldiers to surrender, at that time, no single Khmer Rouge soldier entered Battambang as yet. By 1 p.m., I saw the vehicle of the governor of Battambang passing my place to the Chamka Chek location. He was heading to Thailand. That's what happened at 1 p.m. At 3 p.m., I saw a small group of Khmer Rouge, a group of 5 to 10 soldiers, both men and women, were standing guard at some public parks and gardens. And at night, at about 1 a.m., I heard the noise of some motorcycles, and people were cheering up all across the city of Battambang. I didn't know where they got these motorbikes, but I asked them something about this, and I was told that the Khmer Rouge had broken the doors of the prisons, and that they had woken up people so that they could get the motorcycles to march on the street, so that they could cheer and chanted some slogans during the night. That happened in particular to Battambang, people at Battambang, provincial town, I believe. Question. Yesterday you testified before the chamber when questions were put to you by the prosecutors. You said that 13 of your colleagues, medical colleagues, were taken away to be executed on the 21st of April 1975. They were all executed at the paddy field at Omal location. And the next morning, you came to the military hospital through a small door, and you were stopped. You were stopped by your another colleague, and then you proceeded to move to another door, attempting to go into the hospital, but then was stopped by another colleague. And at the same time, you indicated that you saw some sick people were limping out of the hospital when other sick patients were placed on the pedal cart and taken away. It was a very sad moment. Can you tell the chamber, please, whether you knew that these people had to leave the hospital on their own accord or they were expelled? Response. When I came to the hospital, the military hospital, to see what actually happened inside the premises of the hospital, I, from outside, saw some patients walking out of the hospital randomly. I did not know whether these people had been forced to leave the hospital or they had to leave because they were afraid. Because at that time, there was no medical staff remain in the hospital, but I believe that these people left the hospital out of fear of the Khmer Rouge. Question. Apart from seeing these sick people leaving the hospital, did you remember having heard of gunshot or people being shot dead in the hospital? Response. No, I haven't heard anything about this. Question. I have a few more questions concerning the date of the evacuation of people from Battambang province. I would like to refer to the same book under ERN 00678769 in Khmer, English 00369689. At dawn on the 25th of April 1975, the soldiers dressed in black with scarf on their head shot guns into the air in the city. Some other soldiers were walking to the front of some houses when holding loudspeakers. and making some announcement. I walked out of my home to ask a neighbor about what happened. My question to you is, during the evacuation, did you hear that ordinary people or civilian was or were subject to be shot at if they protested such order to evacuate? Response: I only learned that all the people had to leave. No one stay, and people could not challenge such order by the Khmer Rouge, or they would risk being shot. And I did not see anyone being shot at when they protested such instruction. That's not was my experience. Question: when you were evacuated to the new place in Dam Ray Slap village, Don Tiêu district, did you see other 17th of April people being evacuated to that same location as yours? Response: on the 17th of April 1975, evacuees were all but Dambong villages. Later on, we were joined by other evacuees from Phnom Penh, and these new evacuees would then be placed in other villages through train. Question: Mr. President, with your leave, I would like to read another document which is under Khmer ERN 00678775, English ERN 00369693. I would like to read it as follows. Apart from the militia, the Khmer Rouge created undercover militia to spy on the people. And these undercover militia were male and female young people who were recruited in the village. These young people would sneak under our beds to spy on us, to see whether we would converse during the nights, and that they would report to the upper echelon. My question to you is, when these undercover militia spy on your conversation, was it happening only to the new people or to every person in the cooperative? Response: I did not know who they spied on, but they were undercover militia, and I believe that they could spy on anyone they felt suspicious about, and in particular the new people. Question: what happened to people who had been reported on to the upper echelon? Whether any punishment was rendered to any of them? I would like to read the same document to him. The President intervenes. Indeed, your question was not yet responded, as his response could have been lost because his mic was not activated when he was speaking something. Response: I do not know whether this undercover militia listened to anyone, and whether report was ever made to the upper echelon. They were undercover, and their mission was secret. I would like to read another document which is under 00678777 in Khmer English 00369695. You stated that the term family was used instead of husband and wife, and that terms, other new terms also was used. How did you learn these terms were asked to use that way? Response. As I indicated yesterday, the Khmer Rouge did not pronounce or make any pronouncements through written forms. Normally, they did that from one person to other person. It was a kind of distribution of information from word to mouth. Question. When did you learn that the cooperative was established and that the communal eating was part of the policy? Response. At the beginning, during the evacuation, no cooperative was established yet because evacuees could bring along with them their foodstuff. Food was not of short supplies as yet. Cooperatives were then established by 1976 after the Khmer New Year. By then, people were asked to eat at the communal hall collectively. Question. You worked at Prek Luang as you stated. I would like to cite your document which is under ERN in Khmer 00678785, English ERN 00369702. You stated that people who came to have their medical check were base people. They came to ask for medicine rather than having their condition checked. My question to you is, why the majority of people who came to the hospital asking for medicine were mainly the base people, not the new people? Response. I can say that at that time, it was 1 month after the evacuation had taken place. So, new people from the city were still well and did not fall sick as yet. Those who came to ask for medicine were the base people, in particular those who did not have access to the hospital or medical service before. That's why they came to ask for some medicine. Question. I may also seek some clarification. Yesterday you stated already that during that regime, the Khmer Rouge regime, the Khmer Rouge soldiers, medic, were trained for 1 week only before they could do their job. And the other professional medical personnel who survived the regime, the Lona regime, had been executed. My question to you is that, did you know whether some kind of medical ethics being placed as part of the medical training to these new doctors? Response. What I was talking about yesterday was the words I heard from Kak Pan, Comrade Su, who stated in his long speech, I may repeat, he said that Angkar did not need to waste 7 years to train any medical staff. Angkar would need only 7 days to train the doctors or medics. And I also forgot to mention that, secondly, he said, by doing exercise or working, do the labor work, then people are healthy and they would be free from getting sick. And also how these doctor or medics would be trained, I don't know, and perhaps it is best that I would not be allowed to know in any way. Question. Yesterday you also testified that while you're working at P2 military hospital, when Khmer Rouge soldiers who were seriously ill, then you would be summoned to treat them. But at P1 hospital, the civilian hospital, even people, civilians who were very seriously ill, then you would not be called to treat them. Can you tell us what the difference? Why that happened? The President, witness, please hold on before you proceed to respond. You may now proceed. Response. The difference is already elaborated in my statement yesterday. The difference seen in the treatment in military hospital and civilian hospital. At the military hospital, it was the place where soldiers would be well treated because it is the military hospital for Angkar where soldiers would be well taken care of. But at the civilian hospital, it was for everyone, so they did not pay great attention to the civilians who were sick there. However, I had been at the civilian hospital for 2 months only, and that they had to be made to sit in the corridor of the hospital where they could eat their meals. It was miserable, and people were left helpless without proper care, and I was not asked to treat the civilians. Although I personally had 2 cousins who were sick and admitted to their civilian hospital, I was not allowed to treat them, and later on they died at the hospital. That did not only happen to me personally, I think it was the general case. It happened to every civilian who was admitted to that hospital. They didn't have received good care. Question. You said you worked at the civilian hospital for 2 months. What was the kind of disease or sickness these people had when they were admitted to that hospital? Response. At civilian hospital, the majority of the patients were those who had problem with sanitation or hygiene. They had some diarrhea, severe diarrhea, and also they had some disease, sickness as like malnutrition. They became very thin and pale, in other words, emaciated. Question. How many medical staffs were working there, and how many patients were admitted to the hospital during the 2-month period you worked there? Response. I cannot estimate the number of the patients at the civilian hospital. However, I noted that some of the offices were grinded to a halt. In particular, the children ward and also the place where pregnant women would deliver the baby would also be closed down. And rarely did we see pregnant women come to the place to deliver the baby. Patients would be put together in the same hall. They were treated no less than the animals being treated. Question. I thank you very much. I would like to also have a few more questions concerning the evacuation of Phnom Penh from Phnom Penh. Mr. President, I would like to also read the same document, which is 00678805 in Khmer. In English, 00369716. I met a friend of mine who is a doctor having the same name as mine, Mr. Chun Lee, and another doctor who worked with me in Kampong Cham, Mr. Long Naret and his wife. They said that Khmer Rouge brought new people through train and that these people would be allowed to get off the train at Mong Risai and Phnom Thapade and other train stations on the way to Sisupon. My question is, did you know that Khmer Rouge soldiers or cadres would be waiting at each station to receive the evacuees? Response. I don't know about this, but I know that sick people were dropped. They were dropped at each train station. For example, at Thapade Mountain, which was the location where water was scarce, and it was the very impoverished area of the town, and people would be then dropped there. And at the same time, I also saw people making their journey all the way to my village, and some would be heading to Sisupon and other districts of that province. Whether there were Khmer Rouge cadres waiting at each station, I don't know about this. Question. Were you aware or told whether people on the train were ever given any food or water? Response. I didn't ask people about this, and they didn't tell me anything about this either. Thank you. I would like to ask you a few more questions concerning your knowledge of the senior leaders of the Democratic Cambodia. Mr. President, I would like to also read the document from his book under ER and in Khmer 0067826 and English 00369730. You said that Nong told me that Ieng Sari paid a visit to the rice field, and that Ieng Sari inspected the location using the binoculars. Can you tell the chamber, please, did you know what Ieng Sari title was at that time? Response. I worked at the military hospital P2, and on that day the head of the hospital announced that the whole city would be closed for 1 day. No traffic would be allowed. It was a ghost town already, but then traffic was not allowed for 1 day. And at noon, I saw a Mercedes vehicle escorted by some group of people. I did not see who were exactly in the vehicles, but I knew that this convoy was heading to Phnom Sompo location. 3 days later, Nan, who was a former Buddhist monk and who became a medical staff at the military hospital in charge of transporting meat and rice to the hospital, told me that the people who were on in the vehicles that we saw yesterday, one of whom was Ieng Sari, who was expecting the farmers at the paddy fields. He didn't go to the fields directly, but he saw them through his binoculars. Question: did you or were you told what Mr. Ieng Sari did or what his function was at that time? Response: at that time, I knew that Mr. Ieng Sari was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Democratic Cambodia, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Council, thank you. I have another question concerning another leader. I would like to read from your document under ERN00 in Khmer 678828 English 00369731 through 32. You indicated in your book that Mr. Nuon Chea was the President of the Assembly during the Democratic Cambodia regime. My question to you is, how did you know he was the head of the Assembly at that time? Who told you about this? Response: frankly, I heard about this, but I don't recollect how I knew this. Council, thank you. I would like to also proceed to reading another document under ERN in Khmer 00678830 English 0036973233. You said on one occasion Chun Kaset's mother told you that yesterday Nuon Chea came to pay a visit to his family and that your sibling asked Nuon Chea where Annie and her husband. Annie was Nuon Chea's sister whose husband worked at the National Bank of Cambodia. In Phnom Penh, Nuon Chea would spend some time at Annie's house. And Nuon Chea said at that time that he assured his mother not to be so worried because everywhere you could find rice to eat. My question to you is, did Nuon Chea pay a frequent visit to his family at that time? Response: on the part that I wrote in my book, before I wrote this, I already asked some information from Nuon Chea's sibling to confirm the account, and it was true from that. When I worked at the military hospital, the hospital was located just adjacent to not far from Mr. Nunchia's house. And about 1 or 12:30, I would take the opportunity of the break to cycle to Nunchia's mother. And I paid a frequent visit to her as well. And on one occasion, Nunchia's mother told me about this. She said that yesterday Nunchia came to pay a visit to his mother. And then Nunchia's sister asked where Annie's husband was. Indeed, Annie's husband worked at the National Bank. And she also told me that Nunchi assured the family member that it didn't matter where they would go, rice would be plentiful. And I asked to confirm this information, and on 2 occasions the account was confirmed. And by 1960s, when Nunchia was operating as an undercover agent, he worked and spent some time staying at Annie's house. And my wife also knew her very well. But now Annie lives in America.
I would like to follow up on this question. Did you hear any other information about Nguyen Chia other than his visit to his mother? Did he go to inspect the construction site or so in Battambang province? Response: that I did not know. Question: this is going to be my last question. You specify in your book time and again that during the Khmer Rouge regime, you listened to the VOA, and you did this in a secret manner. In other words, you did not listen to it openly. But at the times, did you hear or did you tune in frequency of the Democratic Cambodia radio? Response: during the Khmer Rouge regime, to me, I needed food. I was starving. I was not only starving for food, but I was starving for information as well. That's why I took the risk to listen to the Voice of America. I had the headset and I kept it somewhere in my pocket, and I listened to this radio, but never did I listen to the Democratic Cambodia radio. I only listened to the Voice of America. And after listening to the VOA, I also tried to pick up English language, because VOA at that times they broadcast in Khmer, and then it was followed by the English version. So I also took that chance to learn English. I found that it was an opportunity for me to learn English because it repeated the same information in English version. Counsel, I thank you, Mr. President. I do not have any further question for the witness. I would like to hand over to my colleague.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour, Mesdames et Messieurs les juges. Et bonjour à vous, Monsieur. Je suis le co-avocat principal pour les parties civiles et j'ai encore quelques questions à vous poser. Je voudrais d'abord régler un problème technique parce que j'entends une traduction anglaise de ce que je dis.
President. Court officer, please check with the interpretation booth.
Je crois que c'est réglé, Monsieur le Président.
I think the problem has been solved, Mr. President. I can now hear the interpretation in French. Mr. Witness, I will put to you a few different questions following the questions that have already been put to you, and I thank you for your answers given so far. I'll put to you some follow-up questions. My first question has to do with what you said regarding the Vietnamese. You stated to the prosecutor yesterday that as of the 19th of April, the Khmer Rouge said the Vietnamese had to leave the country. You referred to that. Do you know whether they left? And do you know what became of those who remained in the country in light of what you wrote in your book?
During the colonial era, the Vietnamese were gathered into two places. And on the 19th of April, the Khmer Rouge ordered that all the Vietnamese be transferred back to Vietnam. It was not far from the hospital. It was in Bang Cha. I saw many boats waiting to transport those Vietnamese, both women and children, down the stream all the way to Tonle Sap. That's what I knew of the situation of Vietnamese people at that time, and I did not know whether or not those Vietnamese eventually reached Vietnam. And even until today, if I asked them, there was no any clear-cut answer as to whether or not they had reached Vietnam.
Est-ce que vous savez si certains sont restés?
Do you know whether some of them stayed behind?
I saw a minority few of Vietnamese remained. I saw a midwife who was working with me at a hospital by the name of Van Reet, and his father was Cambodian and his mother was Vietnamese. And her husband was Cambodian. In 1967, they were all executed. Her fathers went to welcome the prince, and her entire family were executed. And in the village, the situation was the same. Those who had the Vietnamese origin, even if the origin was actually transcended for many generations, but so long as they found out, they would be killed as well at that time.
Est-ce que vous avez entendu les Khmer Rouges?
Did you hear the Khmer Rouge identify other categories of persons, whether they were foreigners or Cambodians, to make sure they received particular treatment?
They never talked of those people. I had never heard them talk about the French or the British or other foreigners. They only mentioned the Vietnamese enemy or the UN enemy, KGB or CIA. These were the categories of people they mentioned.
Merci.
Thank you. You explained that at the time of the arrival of the Khmer Rouge and during the evacuation of Battambang, the cathedral inter alia was destroyed. Were any other buildings, whether lay, secular, or religious, destroyed during the evacuation of Battambang?
The Catholic building in Battambang was built in the 19th century, and the Khmer Rouge was destroyed in mid-1976. It was not immediately after the falls of Battambang. As for Buddhist pagodas, certain Buddhist pagodas were transformed into prisons. And the other were transformed into the detention center. For example, one of the pagodas there was transformed into the operation training center. Now, for example, if they would send anyone for operation experiment, they would bring those people to this pagoda. As for other religious buildings of other religions, of course there were not many sectoral or religious buildings. There were only a few Chinese monasteries or so, but other than that there were only Buddhist pagodas in one cathedral.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. In order to complete your answer to the question, you said that pagodas were converted into other kinds of buildings. How do you know that the pagodas were converted to prisons, detention centers, or surgical experimentation centers?
For Vipat Pagoda in particular, to my knowledge, in 1979 I went back there again, and in front of the crematory oven there was a table lying in front of this oven, and those who were operated and then died would send and be cremated over there. So they told me, I actually heard of it, that it was used as a surgical operation theater, and I later on found out that it was true. And as for other pagodas, they were converted into security centers. They were the places where people were detained. And some of them were also converted into the warehouse of ammunition, because there were bombardments by the Vietnamese on certain pagodas in Wat Kandal Pagoda, and because those places were used to store ammunition, and I heard from the villagers that many pagodas were converted into prisons or detention centers.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. If you moved around during the evacuation of Battambang, did you observe the evacuation of towns that were smaller than Battambang?
During the Khmer Rouge era, we did not have freedom of movement. If we did not have the permit or we did not receive any order, we would not be able to move freely.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Be it through meetings or over the radio, did you get to know what was happening elsewhere in the country?
I listened to the Voice of America, but at that time I heard very little about what was going on in Cambodia. In one instance, I only heard the news about the evacuation of people out of Phnom Penh to Battambang province. That was the only instance I heard through Voice of America at that time. And in addition, after I left the hospital, I was asked to mind the cattle, and I listened to VOAs, and I heard news about foreign politics and foreign news in general. For example, I heard about the former President Jimmy Carter of the United States, and he was the one who launched the submarine operated by the nuclear power. And later on, I also listened to the Voice of America, and I heard that a Chinese pilot who was a major, he was flying the MiG-27. He had to land abruptly in Taiwan. But then later on, I did not have any access to battery, because at that time we had to have batteries in order to listen to the radio. And I had earlier on I had access to battery because I had some gold in exchange for the batteries. But then I ran out of gold.
I crave your indulgence, Mr. Witness. I have very little time left. May I request you to answer my questions as concisely as possible, and may I request the President to give me a few more minutes. I will proceed to put a few very pointed questions to you, and may I request you to answer them as concisely as possible. As of July 1975, you arrived at the hospital. What was the condition of that hospital? I'm talking about surgical equipment, medical equipment, and so on and so forth.
When I came to the military hospital, P2, everything was in a chaotic situation. It was scattered everywhere. First, the hospital director designated me to set up the pharmacy. He asked me to put medicine in the shelter and according to the categories of medicines. And then he also asked me to look at the X-rays machine and have it put in an X-ray room. And then after that, they asked me to reorganize the medical facilities in the hospital. I did not actually have the technical skills in radiology or the medical equipments, but I had to do it at that time, and I had to prepare the surgical equipments in 3 different containers at that time.
ដូច្នេះ
So in terms of the facility as well as equipment over there, it was very basic, but it could be done. And the surgical work was not done in the military hospital. Operation needs to be carried out in Battambang Civilian Hospital because this military hospital did not have the skills to conduct surgical operation.
Thank you very much. A few more questions. You told us that the policies that the Khmer Rouge expressed to you was that you, townspeople, had to go and work in the countryside, have an agricultural lifestyle, work hard in the fields with certain privations. Now, as far as you are aware and from what you have seen, did the Khmer Rouge cadres, as one went up in the hierarchy, apply the same policy to themselves and their families? Or did they benefit from privileges, and if so, which privileges?
Response. The Khmer Rouge cadres applied a policy, a secret policy. They ate adequately, or they had enough food to eat, but that was done in secret because they did not allow other people to know, because general population didn't have enough to eat.
Thank you. This morning and yesterday as well, you said that some people who had been evacuated from Phnom Penh came to your village. Did you have a chance to talk with these people?
Response. After Phnom Penh evacuees were transferred to my village, I and my family member went to see them, hoping that we would find some of our lost relatives. We conversed with them, but very briefly. We just asked them how they were, and that's all.
ប៉ុន្តែពេលនោះខ្ញុំសង្កេត
However, at that time, what I noted was that these people had to travel a very long distance. They were very exhausted. But I also noted that they had some food that they brought with them. And at the same time, I could also feel that the children who came with them did not enjoy the playful atmosphere as the normal children did.
Est-ce que
Did these people describe the evacuation from Phnom Penh? And was it comparable to the evacuation from Battambang? Were the instructions from the Khmer Rouge the same kind of directives as you were given? Were the evacuation conditions generally similar to the ones that prevailed in Battambang?
Response. I believe that the evacuation in Battambang was not the same as that in Phnom Penh, because there was fewer people in Battambang than in Phnom Penh. And I believe that the evacuation of people from Phnom Penh could be, people could endure more hardship because they had to travel a long distance. So I can say that the two evacuations cannot be compared. The President, Mr. Witness, you are now instructed to respond to only what you bore witness to or what you saw and you experienced. You are not allowed to subjectively speculate or voice your opinion, because when it comes to experiences, the elements in your testimony must be those that are relevant to what you saw.
Of course, I was talking about what people actually told you rather than what you might have imagined. Sir, you were a tried and tested doctor for most of your life. In 1975, for a few months, and then after March 77, the Khmer Rouge asked you to go and work in the fields. Since that was not to exploit your medical competences, which are useful in any society, what precisely was the objective for you to go and work in the fields? If you were told, of course, rather than working as a doctor. Did they provide you with any reasons for this?
Response: it was difficult for me to understand why that happened to me. The President Counsel, you will have one more question to pose to this witness.
I understand, Mr. President. This is therefore my last question. So after the evacuation of Battambang and the forced transfer of its population to the rural areas, and indeed of your own family, sir, what were the consequences for your family and for your children and for those who are close to you of all of this?
Response: my siblings and relatives had to also be made to do farming as I did. The President, thank you, Counsel and the witness. Since it is now appropriate time for the adjournment, the Chamber will adjourn, and the next session will resume by 11 o'clock. Court officer is now instructed to assist the witness during the adjournment. The President, Counsel, actually we have already provided you one question to put to this witness, and you already asked him the question.
Som Jane Groucho.
Prochaine fois, je prends mon temps.